So imagine waking up tomorrow morning, right? You open your eyes and you realize that the greatest, the most terrifying enemy you're going to face today isn't a dragon.
Right. Or some dark lord.
Exactly. Not an invading army, nothing like that.
Yeah.
It is literally just a flight of 16 wooden stairs.
Oh, it's brutal.
It really is. Like, you have to
Ugh.
calculate the angle of your cane, you have to figure out the distribution of your weight, and just brace for the agonizing physical cost of moving from the second floor to the first.
Well, just getting out of bed is a battle.
Yeah. So, welcome to our deep dive into the world of the First Law. We are jumping into a world today where the traditional heroes are so physically and morally broken that just walking down a hallway is like a high-stakes boss fight.
It's a phenomenal space to explore, really, because it strips away that stained glass clarity we usually expect from epic fantasy.
Yeah, totally.
Like, we aren't looking at a binary conflict of pure good versus absolute evil here. We're examining this intricate, incredibly cynical ecosystem of power and trauma.
And institutional rot, right?
Yeah, exactly. The text we're dissecting today is basically a masterclass in the deliberate deconstruction of all those genre tropes we know.
Right. Taking the familiar silhouettes and just...
Hollowing them out, yeah. Taking the wandering barbarian, the dashing cavalry officer, the wise wizard, and filling those recognizable shapes with, well, profound human flaws.
And what I love is that the author tells you exactly what kind of surgical dismantling you're in for before you even hit chapter 1.
Oh, the framing devices.
Yes. Yeah, we have to talk about those framing devices right at the front. First, there's the dedication. It just reads, for the 4 readers, you know who you are.
So good.
Right. It immediately punctures any balloon of high fantasy pretension. It's like the author's winking at you from the corner of a dingy pub.
Letting you know we aren't taking ourselves too seriously here.
Exactly. But then you turn the page and you get this massive mood whiplash.
The epigraph.
Yes, this incredibly heavy quote from Homer's Odyssey. The blade itself incites to deeds of violence.
And that Homeric quote, that is the philosophical engine of the entire narrative.
It really sets the tone.
It does. It forces this fundamental question about causality and human agency. Like, does the presence of a weapon, the blade, the institution, the magic, does that inherently generate the violence?
Or is the violence just, a pre-existing condition of the human animal?
Right. Is it just waiting for the right tool to express itself? It's this massive debate on systemic determinism versus individual free will.
Are these characters acting out of their own violent natures, or are they just trapped?
Trapped in an environment that basically demands violence as the baseline currency of survival.
Exactly.
I love that framing for you listening to this, because as we track the 3 main perspectives today, we're constantly watching them bump up against that exact question.
Are they holding the blades, or the blades holding them?
Yeah. So let's throw ourselves right into the deep end with our first perspective, Logen Ninefingers.
The Bloody Nine. The most feared man in the North. And if you come into this expecting some Frank Frazetta painting of a muscled hero standing on a mountain of corpses...
Roaring into the storm.
Right, roaring into the storm, the text violently corrects your expectations.
Well, this version is total and immediate. We are dropped right into the middle of a chaotic ambush, but it is entirely stripped of any martial glory.
He's just running for his life.
Literally running for his life from the Shanka, the Flatheads. He's separated from his crew, his found family. He isn't executing complex sword maneuvers.
He's running barefoot through freezing slush.
Right, stepping on wet pine needles and just desperately treading to manage his own exhaustion. The narrative prioritizes the brutal reality of panic over any concept of heroism.
And the physical comedy of it is almost tragic. He doesn't make a heroic last stand against impossible odds. He trips.
Yeah, he falls in the mud.
He sprawls onto his side and nearly eviscerates himself with his own axe.
Which is such a great detail.
It is. And then, when a massive Shanka drags him over the edge of a ravine and he's hanging over this raging river, Logen makes a choice that completely redefines the barbarian archetype.
He gets bitten in the calf.
Yeah, he gets bitten, realizes he physically cannot pull himself back up to the ledge to keep fighting, and he actively chooses to let go.
He just drops.
He flings himself backward into the abyss. He prefers the chaotic mercy of a freezing river over dying with a weapon in his hand.
And that conscious choice to let go, it's a profound psychological pivot.
How so?
Well, Think about the classic berserker archetype. It's defined by a suicidal commitment to the fight, right?
Right. Dying in battle to go to Valhalla or whatever.
Exactly. The berserker dies with his hands wrapped around the enemy's throat to secure a place in a glorious afterlife. But Logen explicitly rejects the mythology of his own culture.
His internal monologue is entirely governed by cold arithmetic.
He wants to live, not to achieve a great destiny, but simply to continue metabolizing oxygen.
I was reading his internal monologue, and I kept thinking, like, I shouldn't be comparing Logen to Conan or Achilles.
Who should you compare him to?
The psychological profile here is so much closer to a profoundly burnt-out corporate contractor who is just desperate to get out of a toxic industry.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. He isn't seeking a glorious death. He repeatedly complains that he just wants to sit in a proper chair for 5 minutes.
And his recurring mantra, the thing he mutters to himself constantly.
You have to be realistic.
Yes, you have to be realistic. It's the coping mechanism of a man who has survived a lifetime of trauma by just suppressing his own ego.
So when he drags himself out of the river, battered and freezing, the traditional narrative dictates he has to embark on a righteous vengeance quest.
He should climb back up that mountain and hunt down the creatures that killed his friends.
But Logen runs the variables.
Right. He's unarmed, wounded, alone in hostile territory. The realistic outcome of a vengeance quest is just becoming a corpse full of arrows.
So he abandons it. He prioritizes mundane survival over narrative satisfaction.
Which brings us to the cook pot.
Oh my gosh, the cook pot, yes.
This sequence is just a staggering piece of character work.
So Logen manages to sneak back to his ruined camp later, right? And he believes his friends, Forley, Grim, the Dogman, Black Dow, he thinks they're all dead.
He's scavenging through the mud for anything to keep him alive.
And what is the one item he elevates to the level of a sacred relic? It isn't a banner. It isn't a lock of hair from a lost love.
It's a massive, blackened, incredibly heavy iron cookpot.
He digs it out of the dirt, stares at it, and actually speaks to it. He says, "It's just you and me now."
The cookpot functions as this brilliant physical manifestation of emotional history.
Yeah.
Because in a nomadic, hyper-violent society like the North, the cookpot is the center of the community.
It's where they shared resources.
Exactly, where they bonded, where the hierarchy of the group was flattened by the shared necessity of just getting calories.
So by choosing to carry this massive, unwieldy piece of iron across the mountains, Logen is literally dragging the weight of his dead social structure behind him.
It is a thermodynamic nightmare to carry that much metal on a starvation diet. But the psychological need to preserve the memory of his found family just completely overrides his pragmatism.
And I'm so glad you brought up that contradiction because I have a major bone to pick with Logan's self-assessment here.
Oh, he constantly lies to the reader.
Yes, and to himself. In his internal monologue, he claims he wants to be a wanderer with no attachments. He claims he's tired of the burden of leadership, tired of people depending on him.
But look at what happens the moment he crosses the mountains.
Exactly. He stumbles upon Malachus Kwai, this pathetic, starving apprentice wizard dying of a fever.
Right.
If Logen is truly the cold, realistic survivor he claims to be, he leaves Kwai to die.
But he doesn't.
No. He puts Kwai on his back and carries a grown man 40 miles to a library.
And to manage that physical burden, he actually has to leave the cookpot behind by a lake.
Telling it, "Fare you well, old friend." It's so sad.
You've isolated the core tragedy of Logen Ninefingers right there. He suffers from chronic, inescapable empathy.
That's such a good way to put it.
He desperately wants to be the unfeeling monster his reputation suggests he is. Because monsters don't feel grief, right?
Right.
But he cannot stop himself from taking responsibility for the vulnerable. Leaving the pot behind to carry Kwai is the ultimate proof that his humanity will always sabotage his desire for a clean, detached existence.
He trades the dead weight of his past for the agonizing living weight of the present.
Beautifully said.
And what is the reward for this brutal 40-mile trek? They finally arrive at the Great Northern Library.
Right, because Logen is seeking a magus.
Yeah, he had this bizarre encounter earlier by a campfire where these fading nature spirits who literally tell him the magic is leaking out of the world by the way they direct him south.
So Logen arrives expecting a figure of terrifying, awe-inspiring majesty.
The absolute zenith of magical authority. And who does he meet? Bias, the first of the Magi.
Which is another surgical strike against genre conventions.
Oh, totally.
Bias is the deliberate antithesis of the Gandalf or Merlin archetype. When we envision the wise wizard, we picture ethereal grace, a flowing beard, a glowing staff.
serene detachment. You expect riddles and grand pronouncements.
Yeah.
But Logen walks into a garden and finds a bald, heavy-set man wearing a blood-stained apron,
Looking exactly like a neighborhood butcher.
aggressively scrubbing animal blood off his thick, hairy forearms in a stone trough.
Baez is earthy, domestic, and immediately starts complaining about the chores.
He completely strips away all the mystique of magic and replaces it with the mundane reality of running an estate.
However, that domesticity is a highly calculated camouflage.
Right, because true power doesn't need to shout.
Exactly. The sociology of power dictates that those who possess absolute authority rarely need to display it through loud aesthetics. Baez doesn't need a pointy hat to demand respect because his power is intrinsic.
And overwhelming. We see the mask slip entirely when Prince Calder arrives.
Oh.
The arrogant, posturing son of Bathud, the king of the Norsemen. Calder strides into the library, tripping with entitlement, and demands fealty or respect from Baez.
He brings armed guards, he tries to project military authority.
And Baez doesn't chant a spell in an ancient language. He doesn't throw a fireball.
He utilizes magic in its most terrifyingly casual form.
He just speaks.
He simply speaks, and the sheer atmospheric pressure of his will forces Calder to his knees.
The prince is left choking, gasping for breath on the floor.
His entire military retinue paralyzed by an invisible, crushing gravity.
And Baez looks down at this suffocating royal and calmly states, "I like to talk to the horse's head, not the horse's arse."
It is an incredibly witty dismissal, but structurally, it establishes that Baez operates on a geopolitical plane entirely separate from the petty squabbles of kings.
He's playing a completely different game.
He is the prime mover.
It's a staggering display of asymmetrical power. So, we have Logen, a man whose brutal, muddy exterior hides a deeply complex, empathetic soul.
Right.
Now, we need to completely shift our geographical and psychological coordinates.
Heading south.
Yes. We leave the freezing, deadly reality of the north, and we enter the sun-dappled, perfectly manicured courtyards of the Union's capital city, Ottawa.
And here we find the exact inverse of Logen.
We find a man with a stunningly beautiful, heroic exterior who is hiding a profoundly hollow, rotting core.
Captain Jezal dan Luthar.
Ugh, Jezal.
Jezal is the personification of late-stage imperial decay.
Yeah.
If Logen's body is a hardened tool forged for the sole purpose of survival, Jezal's body is merely a billboard advertising his socioeconomic status.
That's exactly what it is.
He represents a society that has completely insulated itself from the consequences of its own actions.
He is the ultimate trust fund kid playing it soldier.
Yeah.
He is a captain in the king's own, but the text goes out of its way to clarify the economics of his rank.
He didn't earn it on a battlefield.
No. His wildly wealthy father simply bought the commission for him 6 months ago, infuriating his older brothers, by the way. We first meet Jezal playing cards with his fellow officers, and he isn't playing for the thrill of the game, or even really for the money, because he already has more than he can spend.
He is playing to exert dominance within his social hierarchy.
Exactly. He specifically targets Lieutenant Brent, the poorest officer at the table, a man whose family is visibly struggling.
Yeah, Bryn is sweating with terror over the debts.
And Jezal meticulously, gleefully bankrupts him. And he does it with a charming smile.
He uses the winnings to fund his drinking and womanizing, but the primary motivation is the narcissistic supply he gets from humiliating a subordinate.
His internal monologue reveals a total vacuum of empathy.
It really is a study in unchecked narcissism.
Yeah.
Jezal evaluates every human being he encounters solely on their utility to his own comfort or his public image.
Yes, and this is perfectly mirrored in the way he engages with his own vices. The detail regarding the chaga weed is incredibly revealing.
I love that detail.
I found it hilarious and pathetic at the same time. He smokes this wildly expensive imported narcotic from an ivory pipe, but his internal monologue admits he actually hates the taste.
It burns his throat.
It makes him feel physically nauseous, but he forces himself to smoke it publicly simply because it signals extreme wealth and cosmopolitan taste.
His entire identity is a simulacrum. He is acting out the role of a dashing noble without possessing any of the underlying substance.
Which brings us to his military training.
Right, which highlights the absurdity of a peacetime army run by aristocrats.
Jezal is training for the contest, which is this annual fencing tournament. It's a highly ritualized, heavily rules-bound simulation of violence.
He's sparring with Major Column West under the tutelage of Lord Marshal Varuz.
And Jezal's reaction to the physical exertion is so telling. He doesn't view it as preparation for life or death combat.
No, he views it as an egregious insult to his comfort.
He complains about the sweating. He complains about getting bruised by the blunted practice swords.
When Varus forces him to run up the 291 steps of the Tower of Chains to build his stamina,
Oh my God, Jezal treats it as though he is enduring the greatest human rights violation in history.
he genuinely believes that because he is wealthy and handsome, the universe owes him success without effort.
And Varus attempts to penetrate this delusion. He offers Jezal a piece of vital, life-saving philosophy. He says, overconfidence is a curse to the swordsman. You must treat every opponent as though he will be your last.
Varus is trying to impart the reality of lethal stakes.
But the lesson completely deflects off Jezal's armor of ego. He merely fantasizes about the old man falling down the flight of stairs.
Jezal is fighting for a shiny trophy to impress women in the gallery. He has absolutely no conceptual framework for the kind of mud and blood survival that defines Logen's existence.
But that completely insulated, curated reality finally suffers a breach.
And the mechanism of that breach is R.D. West.
Major West's sister. Jezal goes to meet her with his prejudices fully armed.
Because she is a commoner from the provinces.
Right, so he assumes she will be fat, peevish, uneducated, and desperate for his approval. He expects this ego-stroking encounter.
Instead, he opens the door to a complete system shock.
Ardi is the intrusion of reality into the Agriant's mythology.
She possesses a dark, arresting beauty, but more importantly, she possesses a razor-sharp intellect unburdened by the capital's sycophancy.
She does not care about his rank, his money, or his jawline.
And she actively dismantles his pompousness.
They take a walk down the Kingsway, passing these massive, imposing statues of the High Kings like Herod the Great and the looming architecture of the House of the Maker.
Jezal puffs out his chest, trying to play the sophisticated tour guide.
Expecting her to be cowed by the majesty of the Union. And she looks at a statue of a legendary king and basically says, looks like a grumpy old man with a pigeon sitting on his head.
I love her so much.
She refuses to participate in the collective hallucination of the empire's grandeur.
She strips away the semiotics of power. She recognizes that the statues and the architecture are just masonry designed to intimidate the populace.
Yeah. Now, the crucial psychological question here is, why doesn't Jezal simply abandon her?
Right, because she is mocking him, denying him his usual narcissistic supply. Why is he so captivated?
It's a great question.
I think, on some deeply buried subconscious level, Jezal is suffocating under the weight of his own artifice.
Everyone in his life lies to him.
His friends lie for his money. The women he courts lie for his status. R.D. is the first person who looks at him and tells him the unvarnished truth.
It's like a breath of actual oxygen for a man who has been breathing recycled air his entire life.
Exactly. It is the first tiny microscopic crack in his armor, hinting that he might possess the capacity for authentic connection.
It is a hopeful interpretation, I'll give you that. But that nascent capacity for authenticity is immediately put to a brutal test.
Yes, when they encounter the physical embodiment of everything Jezal refuses to acknowledge.
During their walk in the park, the sunny facade of Jezal's world collides head-on with the subterranean horror of the Union's foundation.
They run into Inquisitor Sandan Glokta. This scene is a masterpiece of discomfort.
We need to remember that before the Gurkish War, Glokta was Jezal.
Right.
Glokta was the handsome, arrogant, wildly successful cavalry officer who won the contest. But then he was captured, and he spent 2 years in the Emperor of Gurkul's prisons.
He was systematically, creatively dismantled.
And now he is a ruined, crippled specter haunting the capital. When Jezal looks at Glokta, he doesn't feel pity.
He feels a visceral, almost violent disgust.
He wants to flee. He physically cannot process the existence of permanent, disfiguring suffering because it threatens his entire worldview.
Jezal's reaction highlights the moral cowardice of the aristocracy. They are happy to send men to fight their wars, but they refuse to look at the broken bodies that return.
But Ardi provides the critical contrast.
Ardi doesn't flinch.
She steps forward. She looks the crippled inquisitor in his weeping, ruined eyes. She addresses him not as a monster, but as a man she remembers from her childhood.
She asks about his well-being with genuine, startling compassion.
And that compassion completely paralyzes both Jezal and Glokta. Neither of them knows how to process basic human decency.
Jezal is repulsed by the ugliness.
But as we transition into our third perspective, we realize that Jezal's pristine, beautiful world only exists because men like Glokta are doing the unspeakable, necessary work in the dark.
Jezal is the facade. Glokta is the load-bearing pillar of the Empire's cruelty.
We really need to explore the architecture of that cruelty.
Let's examine the phenomenology of Sandan Glokta.
The text forces you into an intimately uncomfortable relationship with his physical reality. There is no sanitization here.
We experience the excruciating mechanics of his daily existence.
It is a masterclass in writing physical limitation. Glokta's daily routine is a parade of indignities.
He wakes up numb, the nerves in his body completely misfiring.
He routinely discovers he has soiled himself in his sleep because his bodily autonomy was stolen from him in the dark.
He requires his servant, Burnham, to physically lift him into a bath.
And his diet consists entirely of lukewarm porridge because his torturers meticulously chiseled out half of his teeth, alternating top and bottom, ensuring he could never chew solid food again.
Every single sensory input is filtered through a lens of chronic agony.
To understand the psychology of Glokta, we must look at how he conceptualizes his environment. You mentioned earlier the idea of a video game boss fight.
Yeah, that framework applies perfectly to how his brain processes space and time.
He stands at the top of a flight of 16 stairs, and he does not see architecture. He sees 16 mortal enemies.
I found the description of him descending those stairs horrifyingly gripping.
It is a massive tactical operation. Cane down, shift weight, left foot down, hold breath, right foot down.
And there is this terrifying moment where his ruined ankle simply gives way.
He stumbles, and the text slows down time to describe the lagging. That agonizing stretched-out millisecond between the physical impact of scubbing his toe and his brain finally registering the incoming tsunami of searing pain.
He just hangs in the air, waiting for the agony to arrive.
And when the pain finally hits, his internal monologue asks a devastating question.
Am I screaming or laughing? How do I tell the difference?
This signals a complete dissociation from his own humanity. The chronic pain has alienated him from his own emotional responses.
The central mystery of his character, the question he asks himself every single day as he forces his broken body out of bed is, why do I do this?
Why does a man in constant, inescapable hell continue to breathe?
Why doesn't he just end it?
I am stuck on that exact question. He clearly hates his life. He hates the Inquisition. He hates the people he tortures. So why does he subject himself to the stairs every morning? Is it just pure, spiteful momentum?
It is about the reclamation of agency. In the Gurkish prisons, he was reduced to a piece of meat. He had absolutely zero control over his environment or his body.
Right.
Now, as an inquisitor, he has become a mechanism of the state. He tortures others, he extracts confessions, he unravels massive financial conspiracies.
Because inflicting pain and exerting institutional control is the only way he can prove to himself that he still exists as a force in the world.
Exactly. His intellect is trapped in a rotting cage, and the Inquisition is the only outlet that allows his mind to flex its power.
And we see the terrifying efficiency of that power in the interrogation rooms.
The mechanics of the Inquisition are not about justice. They are an algorithmic feedback loop designed to protect the status quo.
We watch him interrogate a former friend from the cavalry, Salem Ruse, and then a high-ranking official, Septan Teufel, a master of the mints.
The juxtaposition between Glokta's physical frailty and his absolute institutional authority is striking.
He cannot walk across a room without grimacing, but with a flick of his finger, he commands his practicals, Frost and Severard, to dismantle a human being.
And these practicals are terrifying manifestations of state violence.
Frost is a massive, incredibly strong albino who speaks with a heavy lisp, possessing eyes completely devoid of empathy.
And Severard is a lanky commoner who whistles cheerful tunes while he works, his eyes always smiling above a mask.
They pin Teufel to a table, and Glokta methodically uses a butcher's meat cleaver to amputate Teufel's fingers one joint at a time.
And the violence is sanitized by bureaucratic language. They call it asking questions.
Crucially, this violence has absolutely nothing to do with uncovering the truth.
No, the Inquisition is a data processing machine. The inputs are human bodies, and the output is political leverage.
When Glokta interrogates his former friend Ruse, he forces him to sign a confession implicating Teufel in a massive tax fraud scheme.
Ruse protests, stating he has never even met Teufel.
Glokta's response is a chilling display of systemic apathy. Right, you fat pig. The truth is irrelevant.
What matters is generating the paperwork necessary to execute the political will of his superior.
And when Teufel tries to resist, trying to use his political connections and wealth to threaten Glokta, we see Glokta weaponize his own trauma.
Teufel screams that he will ruin Glokta.
And Glokta just leans in, opens his mouth, and displays the ruined empty gums.
He calmly explains the meticulous day-by-day process of having his teeth chiseled out.
He explains that he pisses sitting down and requires assistance to dress himself.
He uses his ruined body to prove a terrifying point. You cannot threaten a man with ruin when he's already living in the center of hell.
Teufel breaks, not because of the cleaver, but because he realizes he is negotiating with a ghost.
This brings us to the broader economic and political chess game driving these interrogations.
Glokta is summoned by Archlector Sult, the supreme head of the Inquisition.
Sult is the pristine, immaculate puppet master. He dresses entirely in white, his hair perfectly coiffed, visually representing the sterile, unblemished facade of the Union's power structure while he directs the butchery in the basement.
Sult is furious because the socioeconomic balance of the Union is shifting.
The Guild of Mercers, the rising merchant class, the new money is gaining too much financial leverage,
Threatening the traditional inherited power of the nobility. Sult isn't trying to stop tax fraud. He is trying to execute a political purge.
He gives Glokta a special promotion, making him an inquisitor exempt, answerable solely to Sult.
He orders Glokta to bypass the normal channels and completely dismantle the Mercers' leadership.
It is framed as a promotion, but structurally, it is a classic bureaucratic trap. Sult is isolating Glokta, removing his institutional protections.
This is exactly where I struggle to understand Glokta's tactical genius.
Why is that?
Well, he takes his team, Frost and Severard, into the city in the dead of night to secretly arrest the next two Mercer leaders on the list, Willem Dan Rob and Salimo Scandi.
Right.
Severard picks the locks, they slip into the lavish townhouses, only to find both men have already been brutally assassinated.
Their throats are cut.
The Mercers are aggressively cleaning house, silencing anyone who could connect the fraud to the top of the guild.
The Shadow War is already entirely out of control.
Right, so if Glokta is so brilliant, why is he playing this game? He must realize that Sult is setting him up.
Of course he does.
Sult releases Ruse back into the city as bait, explicitly to see if the Mercer assassins will strike again, and he orders Glokta to catch them in the act.
Glokta is being used as a canary in a coal mine to draw out a mole within the Inquisition, likely Superior Callan.
Sult even admits to himself that he picked Glokta specifically because he has no friends, no family, and is universally hated.
If Glokta ends up floating face down in the canal, it solves a problem for Sult.
Glokta knows he is a disposable pawn. Why does he march willingly into the meat grinder?
He marches into the meat grinder because the sheer adrenaline-fueled terror of the intellectual hunt is the only anesthesia that works on his psychological pain.
Wow.
When Glokta stands over those assassinated bodies, realizing the enemy is vastly more organized and lethal than he anticipated, his primary emotion is not fear.
It is a flutter of genuine excitement.
The high-stakes political maneuvering, the proximity to death, the puzzle of the conspiracy, it stimulates his mind so intensely that for a few brief hours, he forgets about his ruined body.
The danger gives his suffering a purpose.
It's exactly.
It is such a dark, twisted realization. He courts death because the adrenaline makes him feel alive.
And while Glokta is fighting this desperate, bloody shadow war in the alleys and basements of the city, the macro consequences of these machinations are playing out in the halls of power.
Right, in the bright, sweltering, utterly incompetent halls of the Open Council. We are moving from the surgical violence of the shadows to the blunt force trauma of terrible governance.
The Open Council scenes provide a devastating critique of administrative bureaucracy. It is the banality of evil applied to legislative procedure.
We see Major Column West Jezel's long-suffering sparring partner, assigned to stand guard in this stiflingly hot, overcrowded audience chamber.
The Lord Chamberlain, Fortistan Hoff, is essentially running the country because the king is senile.
And Hoff is a disaster. He is sweaty, red-faced, downing goblets of wine, and aggressively dismissing petitioners, not based on the law, but entirely on his own physical discomfort and class prejudice.
He functions as a bureaucratic firewall, explicitly designed to prevent the reality of the nation from reaching the mechanisms of power.
We see the human cost of this when Goodman Heath, a desperate, impoverished farmer who has been illegally evicted from his generational land, approaches the dais.
Heath is begging for basic justice.
Hoff doesn't even listen to the plea. He sneeringly dismisses him, stating the king has no time to deal with the trifling issues of peasants.
It's infuriating to read, and then Magister Cult, the head of the Guild of Mercers, steps up.
Cult is furious, complaining that his guild members are being maliciously investigated and harassed, which, of course, is Glokta's doing.
Cult is basically demanding that the government step in and establish order.
And Hoff, completely blinded by his aristocratic disdain for new money, mocks Cult. He declares that the king doesn't grant royal charters just to line the pockets of the trading class and throws him out.
This is the precise moment where administrative incompetence becomes active systemic violence.
By dismissing Cult with such arrogant finality, Hoff fundamentally breaks the social contract.
He tells the Mercers that the state will not protect them or listen to them. Therefore, he inadvertently forces the Mercers to rely entirely on their shadow network of assassins to protect their interests.
Hoff's refusal to govern creates the exact vacuum that Glokta is currently bleeding into.
The government is directly manufacturing its own internal collapse through sheer, willful ignorance.
And if the internal rot wasn't terrifying enough, the external consequences of their foreign policy march right through the door.
Emissaries from Bethod, the king of the Northmen.
The same Bethod that Logen Ninefingers used to kill for.
The collision of the two distinct worlds we've been tracking. The mud of the North meets the marble of the Union.
The Northmen send a diplomat, White-Eye Hansel, who speaks perfect, polite Union tongue, acting entirely civilized. But standing right behind him, serving as a physical manifestation of the northern threat, is Fenris the Feared.
Fenris is an anomaly. He is a nightmare given flesh, a walking violation of the natural order.
He is a hooded giant, so impossibly massive that he actually has to stoop to fit under a 7-foot-tall doorframe. But it's not just his size, it's the aura he projects.
He radiates a literal, supernatural cold.
Major West, who is a highly decorated, seasoned combat veteran, feels the hair stand up on his arms. The heavily armored royal guards instinctively step back, physically repulsed and terrified by the sheer, unnatural wrongness of the creature.
And how does the architect of the Union's policy, Lord Chamberlain Hoff, react to this visceral supernatural threat standing in his own throne room?
He literally laughs at them. He treats them like a traveling circus act.
He dismisses them as unwashed, harmless savages and tells them to come back and present whatever little gifts they brought tomorrow.
He is entirely insulated by his own imperial hubris.
The dramatic irony here is absolutely deafening. If we connect this moment back to Logan's perspective in the freezing wilderness, we understand the true scale of Hoff's error.
Logen knows the arithmetic of the North. Logen has fought in Bethod's shield walls. He knows that the North is a meat grinder that produces monsters capable of shattering the Union's polished cavalry.
Hoff's arrogant dismissal demonstrates the fatal vulnerability of the Empire. The Union believes it is playing a genteel game of diplomatic chess. Bethod is playing a game of absolute extermination.
The Union is entirely unprepared for the reality of violence because they've spent decades outsourcing it to men like Glokta and replacing it with fencing tournaments like Jezal's.
And just when Hoff thinks he has successfully ignored every single crisis the world has to offer, the final visitor arrives.
A man named Yoru Sulfur steps forward.
This is the culmination of the geopolitical setup, the return of the Magi.
Sulfur claims to be the herald of Bayez, the first of the Magi. Naturally, Hoff tries to deploy his usual tactic.
He laughs. He blusters.
He says the king has entertained crazy people, swindlers, and charlatans claiming to be wizards for centuries, and he orders Sulfur thrown out.
But Sulfur doesn't argue. He simply steps forward and drops a sealed letter on the table, a letter bearing a very specific ancient symbol.
Hoff breaks the seal and reads the single line of text.
And the bureaucratic firewall immediately collapses.
Completely evaporates. All the sweating, all the wine drinking, all the arrogant bluster vanishes in a microsecond.
Hoff goes pale. He visibly shakes.
He immediately clears the entire chamber of hundreds of people, swears Major West and the remaining guards to absolute deadly secrecy under threat of the gallows, and frantically summons the most powerful men in the realm.
The Archlector, the High Justice, the Lord Marshal, a single piece of paper from a myth completely paralyzes the government.
Which brings our philosophical and narrative threads together perfectly. We must synthesize what we've seen.
Let's put the pieces together.
Because my mind is reeling. If Bayez is the man Logen just met at the library, the bald, apron-wearing butcher who effortlessly choked out Prince Calder with the word, and now Bayez is sending heralds into the capital with letters that instantly terrify the Lord Chamberlain and hijack the closed council.
Bayaz isn't just a powerful wizard. He is the invisible architect of the entire geopolitical board.
He's pulling the strings in the north and the south simultaneously.
He is the prime mover we discussed earlier. His timing is no coincidence. He is making his move on a global scale at the exact moment the Lord Chancellor of the Union dies, creating a massive power vacuum.
Every single isolated, fragmented storyline we have analyzed today is caught in his gravitational pull.
Logen crossing the continent to find him.
Jezal failing to understand the reality of war.
Glokta fighting a desperate shadow war against a corrupt merchant class.
And West trying to hold together a fracturing government. They are all unknowingly about to be drafted into Bayaz's war.
It is a phenomenal, terrifying setup.
We've spent the last hour unpacking a world where the heroes are deeply, profoundly compromised. We have Logen, a man who claims to be a pragmatic survivor, but is tortured by his own inescapable empathy.
We have Jezal, a stunningly vain aristocrat who embodies the moral vacuum of a rotting empire.
And we have Glokta, a man who was dismantled by the state and now uses the state's own bureaucratic cruelty to keep himself entertained in a life of endless gain.
The text successfully dismantles the comforting illusions of the genre. There are no righteous quests here. There are no inherently noble institutions.
There are only survivors and schemers operating within systems that routinely crush the innocent. Like poor Goodman Heath, left sitting alone on a bench outside the council, his entire life destroyed by a system that refuses to even acknowledge his existence.
The institutions do not serve the people are fuel for the institutions.
It's a dark, incredibly compelling reality to explore. And it brings us right back to the very first page. I want to leave you listening to this with a lingering thought to chew on.
The Homer quote.
Exactly. We talked about that Homer quote at the very beginning. The blade itself incites to deeds of violence. Think about everything we've uncovered today. In a society as fundamentally broken, corrupt, and unequal as the Union, or as brutally, evolutionarily pragmatic as the North, do any of these characters actually possess free will?
Or are they all just different variations of blades forged by severe trauma, by unearned privilege, by economic desperation, being wielded by the invisible hands of institutional power?
Are Logen, Jezal, and Glokta making their own choices? Or are they just tools in a much larger machine destined to cut each other until there is nothing left?